Okay, good morning. Ayin Beis, volume 3. We're literally on the next to last page of the Hemshech, as the Rebbe Rashab left it for us, page 1476. Okay, to sum up what we learned, so we're learning about the two levels of Yichud, Yichud Elah, Yichud Tata. One is experiencing godliness through the lens of existence. The other is experiencing godliness through the lens of God. And then there's the joining of these two, which is Das, which is Kel Deus Havaya. They're both one from the point of view of Atzmus, both Rotzen and Atzmus. The Rotzen to emanate and express a divine that does not relate to existence, that's not Be'erech Liyas Makal Liyesh. Just reading. Rotzen Atzmus is Gili Min Ha'etzav V'lo Liyas B'chinas Makal Liyesh. V'Abeis Liyas Gili Sheyeh Makal Liyesh. So now we understand that the divine plan, these two emanations, the Tzimtzum and the Parsa, will reveal and allow us to discern between the two. But from the point of view of Atzmus, Tzimtzum and Parsa don't affect Atzmus. So there, it's all one. We learned also the difference between Tzimtzum and Parsa. Briefly, that on one hand, the Tzimtzum is deeper because it's a true paradigm shift. Like he said, but he was from Torah he expressed. His psalmist Yesitz, how deeper concealment, because complete concealment, and the Parsa is the does shine through. It's a curtain. The Tzimtzum, nothing shines through. So the very initial Tzimtzum conceals it all. But on the other hand, once something does shine, the Tzimtzum, the that comes after the Tzimtzum, has something in common with the before the Tzimtzum. And the Parsa, on the other hand, changes its personality, like I explained the example of an example. It's like what he used the words here is, because by the Tzimtzum, even though it's not mamish muhus ha'er kedem, because it's still on a high level. It's a oyer that now relates to existence. But it's still not existence. It's not dressing up and being tailored to the details of existence. It's just leaving space for existence. On the other hand, it's gili min ha'etzem. Because now you have to apply yourself and get closer to the very creation to be able to create it. And that's what the Parsa does. As he said on top of the page, so the ikar distinction between the two levels of Oyer la'atzma and the Oyer shaykh la'elamis, or the Ayin of the Yesh Amiti, Ayin Yesh Nivra, is achieved through the Parsa primarily. He says the ikar is through the Parsa for the reason we just explained. I will refer you back to page, in volume 2, I mentioned page 832. He talks about between the difference between Tzimtzumim and Derech Kol Ha'elamis and Elamis. That Tzimtzum is a concealment within you. Elamis is another entity that does the concealment, like a curtain. And there he actually says, he compares that to the Parsais, the second level. So it somewhat helps complement what we're learning here. There's also a mimer called Ki Yesharim Tafresh Pei. Tafresh Pei is the last year, the Rebbe Rashab Tafresh Pei is 1920. So there's a mimer that discusses this topic as well, more at length. Just giving more sources if you're interested in looking into about Tzimtzum and Parsa. And of course, the Torah itself discusses it as well. Okay, but we've already moved from there. The last thing we learned was V'yesh Lemer, that we can say that these two levels of Oyer that we just mentioned are also the level of the Rotzen that there should be Oyer. The Oyer fundamentally is a level that remains transcendent. That's why you see Oyer. Like, let's say, a flame in a candle, the wick is what grounds it, but the Oyer reaches upward. Oyer is always more ethereal. And then there's the second, there's the Rotzen Lias Gili Oyer Lahavas HaKelim. There's the Oyer, the Gili Oyer, in order to create the Kelim, Misavas Oyer, from the thickness of the light, of the spirit, of the energy, Nasa Kelim. That's where we stopped. So it's another additional point that the Rebbe Rashab is making very briefly, and a lot can be, you can unpack it quite extensively, but basically he's demonstrating how these two tracks that we're talking about, that in Atzmus are one, affect the whole Seder Shtalshlus. That's what I think his main point is. He wants to show how it really manifests in Seder Shtalshlus. So till now we've been talking how it manifests in, before he spoke about Pnimius and Chetzenius, then he spoke about Zoh and Malchus, then he spoke about the Gilui Mina Etzem and the Gilui, the Ayin that's Makal Yesh. And now he says it's also connected to the itself, and then the as it creates the containers. So with that, I'm ready to begin to continue on. We are by the line begins Hakelim. It's a little more than halfway down the page. I mean, almost like 2/3 down the page. And the words Gam Yesh Lemer, that's what we'll start learning here. And the pages can be found if you want to follow the text at ayinbeis.com. So another Yesh Lemer. So first Yesh Lemer is about and beyond Kelim, and creating Kelim. It's interesting, I just want to point out one thing. He's saying to create Kelim, he doesn't say the manifesting in Kelim, because that comes afterward, because the creating Kelim is far more engaged, that the itself is creating Kelim. It's not just like we spoke, that the to come from one track, the Kelim from another, and then the and Keli meet. That the Keli itself emerges through the That means that it had to be a rotzen, that the God wanted that the should relate to the Kelim and create them. In a way, it's like saying, if I may use this, I don't know if this is accurate, but it just came to me. The same teacher, besides having brilliant ideas that he understands himself, and then he has other ideas then he has the intelligence as he relates to the student. Then the Parsa, we said, was like an example, a mashal that he gives. But who comes up with the mashal? The mashal is not coming from a third party. The same teacher that's conveying the is also conveying the mashal. So in other words, the is also creating a seichel of the teacher is also creating a mashal, which is like a keli in this case. So in a sense, that just shows that there is an engagement with the to the keli beyond the on its own. Just thought of that thought. Again, he doesn't say that explicitly here, but maybe helps round it out a bit. Okay, so now he's going to continue on and say like this. Gam yesh leimer, we can also say, that these two tracks are also the root of the hidden worlds and the hidden worlds and the concealed worlds. Alma Diskasi, like we've learned many times, is more like the world of thought, the world of water, where everything is concealed under the water. The world of revealed world is the world of speech, like land, where it's revealed. So there's Alma Diskasi, Alma Disgalia. Shari b'maimer de Pasach Eliyahu, in the Maimer of Pasach Eliyahu, Maimer he means referring to Tikkun Ezer that we say every Friday. What does he say? Omer, we say, Antu dafikos, that you are the one that from where emerges, Lanhoga behun alman stimin deloy is galin v'amen dis galin. One of the expressions in that Tikkun Ezer and Pasach Eliyahu is that from you emerges an energy. Lanhoga means to guide, to govern. Both the hidden worlds that are not revealed and the revealed worlds. So you see that there are two types of realities. So that you see from Hashem, God wants these two types of consciousness. V'yesh leimer, and we can say that the alman stimin, the hidden worlds, that comes from the that's higher than relating to the yesh, like the that he said, the first ratzon, the that is beyond. This from this also something is created. Rak so the hidden world is also a creation. However, it's a creation that doesn't have substance because it's concealed. As it's known, the example given for the hidden worlds is midogim shebiyam, from the fish in the sea. Shehem muvloim b'mei hayam. They're absorbed. Muvloim means really they're submerged in the Mei Hayam, the waters of the sea. This refers to a bittul, a sublimation, a yichud and bittul, a unification and a sublimation utter, like bittul and mitziyas that we've talked about. Because a fish cannot exist without water, to the point the fish is like part of the water. V'nikra al mistimin, and this is called the hidden worlds, hainu shein stumin v'nalomim, because they're covered up and concealed, because they're encompassed in their source, in the core. It's not in a state that's outside of the atmosphere. It's all within the water, would mean within the source. It's not outside, meaning as a separate entity that feels itself as a separate consciousness, which is essentially the worlds higher than Biyah, higher than Yesh, what we talked earlier about Bittul B'Mitzias. And what about Alma Dizgalian? The Alma Dizgalian and the revealed worlds, they're the worlds that were created as a separate entity. They have a separate consciousness and they don't feel the source quite like the hidden worlds. This is coming from the second track, the Oyer that emerges, Yitzia, like exits or leaves, this galus and reveals Liyaz B'chinas Mokkah Liyesh. This is already the Oyer that becomes a Mokkah to the Yesh, so it's already engaging with and identifying with the other, with the Yesh. So there you have the next Yesh Leimer. So the first Yesh Leimer explained it's the Oyer is higher than Kalim, and the Oyers that create the Kalim, and now it's Alma Diskasi and Alma Disgali, another Yesh Leimer. All this comes from these two tracks. So what the bottom line is that you see that it really dominates, it just establishes the structure of existence, these two levels. And remember, from the point of view of Avodah, our Avodah is that we will retrace the steps and demonstrate how it all connects. So we begin with Alma Dizgali as our revealed world, and we show its connection to God. But that's more of a bittul, doesn't say here specifically, but bitla yesh. And then comes the next level, Alma Stimin, of the connection through the hidden worlds, which is a bittul mitzias, like experiencing being completely absorbed, completely sublimated, or completely submerged within the waters of the divine, or within the divine higher unity that he's talking about here. Okay. Ubeis hamadreges, and both these levels, hoyu koydem atzimtzum, they both existed before the tzimtzum. The b'chinas hiskal is batzmusei, but as we learned, they were both there, encompassed in the core. There, you can't distinguish between them. God knows that He created them, or manifested them, but they're not yet obvious to anyone else. And there was no distinction of levels. There is like one Oyer that's connected by B'atzmus Ein Sof. Remember the example of the teacher, that though in his mind he also has the intelligence he's going to share with the student, but as long as it's still in the teacher's mind before the Tzimtzum, it's all like one. Tzimtzum Parsa, and here he clearly says the Tzimtzum and the Parsa, and we learned the difference between the two through the concealment and the curtain or the partition. Nechlak lebeis madreges. That separated them and drew out two levels that initially were all encompassed in one. The b'chinas ha'ayin shel hayesh, that the ayin of the yesh, bo b'chinas havdalah, has now become in a state of separation, uberichuk, and distance, mina atzmus, from the core source, lahavas b'chinas yesh nivra, to create a yesh nivra. That's why he brings the Oyer as mahava the kelim. Lahavas yesh nivra, not just to enter, but to actually create the yesh nivra. So in a sense, this makes total sense. Of course, Hashem could have all done this through his magical, through his absolute kol yachol, his abilities, omnipotent powers, that he can do anything. But once he does it this way, it makes much more sense that essentially the energy that relates to us is an energy that does not, at least initially and on a revealed level, is not completely overwhelmed and nullified by the source. In other words, you have to move away from the source in a revealed way to be able to create. So it's the divine energy that is moving closer to us. So it's commensurate and relates to us. We can then relate to it, and then we can climb the ladder as we climb back to the Eir as it is beyond us. I'm just adding this because this is going to be part of obviously the conclusion of the Avodah of it all. But right now he's talking about this process. So it comes down into two tracks all the way down below, even though it originates all in one in the Pre-Tzimtzum, all the way back to the source. Okay. Any questions? I'll stop here for questions. So the truth is, he has added new things here, but I think conceptually and philosophically, the ideas we've learned already. He just now applied it to the Eir and Kelim, to Alma Diskasya and Alma Disgalia. That's the real addition here. But the general principle of two forms of energy and Yichud, and how they are one in their source, we've already learned. And I said we're literally coming out to the last paragraph of the Hemshech, which, as I said, this is not over. It's not over until it's over. We're going to learn the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, the Alter Rebbe's Maimer. But here again, any clarifications needed here?
I'm still a little confused about when the Rebbe here said that there's the ore that creates the kalim. It was my understanding prior that the kalim are coming from the Rishima, which comes from the Koach Gavul and the Or, which comes ultimately from Elamah Helam Atzmi, which is not Giloy. I thought we'd learned there's two tracks ultimately from Atzmos. One is a Giloy and one is a Helam. And so I don't understand how that, when the Rebbe's here, what you just started the class with today, with the fact that the Or creates the Kalim. I guess he's talking about what, the Koach Gavul and the Or from the Rishima, or how is that? We need some clarification on that, please.
You're asking how or why?
How?
The why you understand?
No. So I guess both.
I had the same question.
Well, let's start with the why, and then we'll talk to the how. Remember, the goal is to create total unity down here in existence, that we completely unified. So even though we need different tracks, because to create a structure, you need hierarchy, and you need, simply put, you need Eir and Keli. The Eir is the energy, the Keli is the expression. You need the words on the page, and you need the ideas that are conveyed through the words. But at the end of the day, since ultimately we want total unity, because remember, in Lamaila by God, there are no two tracks. It's all one. God's power to create. But he wants a structured existence. So therefore he made it in a way that has Eir and Keli. But at the end of the day, the goal is to understand that Eir and Keli come from one source, and therefore they also interact with each other much more than just two separate entities that just happen to meet. So I gave the example of the neshama and the guf. Though the soul does not create the body has its own source. But think of it, without a soul, the body would never grow, not in the fetus, and not later. Take away the soul, and the body ceases to be. It doesn't cease, its substance remains, but it cannot grow and it cannot live. Why did God make it that way? If it's two tracks, why doesn't the body live on its own and the soul live on its own, and then they happen to be neighbors for 120 years? Because the point is to create a ultimate unity. The energy, the Eir reveals the divine. The body reveals the purpose of the divine, to make a dira b'tachtenim. So Hashem made it that the Eir itself will carry, and the power to, in the process, the actual process will be of creation of the body, though it has its own root, will travel through the soul. That's why when a person passes away, God forbid, even though the body doesn't decompose right away, because as I said, it's a keli of its own. It's like a keli without an Eir. It says that in Pasuk Elio as well. However, in time it will. Why should it decompose? The body has its own source in Helam Atzmi, as you put it, in Rishimu. Because at the end of the day, the energy of the body is also coming from one God, and that energy travels through the earth. That's the why. The why is because you want ultimate unity. So even if two levels, like for example, it says in Chassidus that Tshuva is higher than Torah, right? Tshuva is higher. But the proof is because Tshuva can repair something that the Torah says you're not allowed to do. So the Torah itself is telling you you're not allowed to do it, but Tshuva is higher than Torah because it reaches a deeper level. But how do we know that? That itself comes through Torah. Torah teaches us that. So Chassidus explains because everything has to come through Torah. I once pointed out a Sichas Chelik Tazayin Vayakel, where the Rebbe speaks about it at length. Torah mitzvahs. Even though mitzvahs are something that mitzvahs are like kelim and Torah is like Torah, and yet the mitzvahs themselves come through Torah. So everything has to travel through Oir. That's what he says in the Ger Sageder Siman Chav, that God created Oir is God's tool of expression. That Oir itself will have two levels of Oir. One level of Oir that is beyond kelim, and one level of Oir that will create kelim. The power of creation comes from a higher place, but it travels through the Oir. The actual process of it is because Oir itself senses the keli, and the keli senses the Oir. In volume 1, we taught that when a wick meets a flame, both of them have to speak to each other. For example, if the wick is made out of metal, it won't burn. If it's made out of one thin thread, it'll also be very negligible and burn out. So the wick has to be made of cotton or some type of material that's conducive to receive the flame. The flame, on the other hand, if it was a big torch, it would never be able to be contained by a wick. So the flame itself has to sense and relate to the keli. So there's the keli within the Oir, and there's the Oir within the keli. Everything in Chassidus talks always about memutzoyim, interfaces, that when you want to have a proper interface, a proper integration between two opposite levels, one has to have the other within it. That makes it more conducive and easier for them to connect to each other. It would require a miracle to bring together two opposites. So God made it that way. That's why you have Malchus of Atzilus becomes Keser of Biyah. Within Bina of Chachma becomes Chachma of Bina. The Midas and Moichin become the Moichin and Midas. Everywhere in Chassidus, you're going to find constant overlap like that, because that makes much richer the interface, that ultimately it's an integration process. And the same thing with children and parents and teacher and student. The teacher has his own ideas, but then he also has within him the idea that he's going to convey to the student. The student has the student within the student, and then the student has the teacher within the student, how he's receptive to receive the teacher's ideas. Wherever you go, you're going to find this, what we call hiskalalus. So Oir, therefore, has what we call hisavus Oir, the ivies, the thickness. The Oir is not just completely detached. The Oir has in it something, some call it, you can call it the particles within it, or the ivies, the thickness that allows it to be a channel that will create the kelim, and it won't be just a foreign entity to it. There is something in common between Oir and keli in that sense. So that's the bottom line. At the same time, they do have two different roles and therefore two different sources. And this is the way it works.
But on the two different wars, we're supposed to be trying to access the hidden light through, shouldn't those two
Well,
things?
I just talked about Eris and Kalim. We didn't talk about hidden worlds and concealed worlds now.
But
The
you
question
said the
here
other
was
track
about
of-
light, the energy and the container. You're
Right.
moving over to the second Yesh Lemer
Yeah,
about
I'm
the
just
reveal.
curious
So
about.
that's a separate discussion. What's your question there?
My question is, are we supposed to be, as part of the avoda, getting to that first hidden track of light? Is that what we're trying to do here?
Well, he's
shouldn't
not.
those two
This
things
is
interface?
the topic is far from finished. Here he's talking about the process of how God set it in motion. He's not talking avoda here. I mentioned it just to help understand it a bit, but he's not talking avoda part. He's going to talk about. We're going to have to learn it in the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer more. But the avoda part is us retracing the steps. But first you have to understand how the machine was built before you repair the machine or before you align the machine. Here he's talking about how existence is built by these two tracks. They come from one source where they're one. The Tzimtzum separates. Then he didn't even mention avoda here. But obviously the whole theme here is about Shema Yisrael and about Baruch Shem, about us uniting and us first growing the first level, like anything. Look, thought and speech are good examples for the hidden world and the revealed world. If we don't communicate with speech, we're definitely not going to understand each other's thoughts, right? So the first step is understanding things in ways that we relate to, which is called speech. Gilui, Alma Dizgalia. As two people get connected with each other and start understanding, they can begin to relate to each other's thoughts, which is like a deeper level of who you are. And then from thought, we go even further to faculties, and from faculties to Kesser, and from Kesser to Ak all the way before the Tzimtzum. We learned earlier, remember, Hamayrik be'echad, when we elaborate on Echad, on the unity begins first on the lowest levels, on the lowest rungs. And then we climb higher and higher. The ultimate purpose is to go all the way back to the source itself. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Rabbi.
That means that the lower level after the Tzimtzum is coming through the higher level. The only things that we're saying that Hashem is having two interests, it does not mean that the lower level is not coming from the higher level. It means that the interest of Hashem in the lower level is exactly like in the higher level. I'm correct?
Yeah, but that takes a lot of work to get to appreciate that. First, you have to begin with Yichud Tata. Then you go to Yichud Elah. Then you come to the understanding of what you just said, that they both originate as one and they're all encompassed as one. But no way can existence have come without the Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum has to conceal the higher from the lower, or else we would have, the student can never receive what the teacher's brilliant mind if the Tzimtzum didn't happen. In other words, what you just said only is possible. First, there has to be a Tzimtzum that completely conceals that level, the higher level. And we start with the lower, and then we climb, and we move all the way back to the Tzimtzum and before the Tzimtzum. Does that answer your question?
Okay. But I the whole entire time I understood that the lower level after the Tzimtzum is not coming through or from the before the Tzimtzum. But now I understand that of course it's coming through before, but like you said, the Tzimtzum is making possibility we should get Hashem. That Hashem
You made it clear before that it's not ayin ma'ayin, which means both levels of Oyer, both come from Atzmus. So Rotzna Atzmus of Gilia Etzem, and Rotzna Atzmus Gili Elha, to be a Mokali Yesh. That's clear, right? But then comes a process. The process is everything travels through Oyer. Then the Tzimtzum will separate these two elements. And he gave a very good example of a teacher and a student. So let's not talk abstract. Talk about the teacher and student and tell me what's unclear there. The teacher has, on top of page 1475, the teacher has his own understanding of an idea. Beautiful. Then the teacher's mind also has the capacity to prepare how he's going to teach this idea to a student. In the teacher's initial state, it's all one. You can't even distinguish the two. Then there needs a tzimtzum where you have these two tracks. One remains with the teacher. The other is transmitted to the student. Now the student, step by step, as he learns, he can start understanding. After 40 years, he can begin to appreciate the teacher's understanding. So everything is coming from the same teacher. No, it's from the same area, but they both do have two, they are both originate, because God wanted, in other words, what he said is the second level of ayin, of did not come from the first level of it originates in Atzmus. It travels through the first level of and they're both encompassed as one. The Tzimtzum separates, and then starts our process from the bottom up. Unless you're talking about something I'm not clear, I'm not picking up. Is that clear?
No, you explained it, but what you said that it's traveling through the up, yeah, that's a process. It has to go the higher and then it travels. What Atzmos is interested in both of them equally.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Calls it says Ratzon Atzmus. It's like one, yeah.
that means if you could say that legabe atzmus, his interest in la'achar tzimtzum is equal to the interest lifnei tzimtzum, maybe even more, because the saver.
I wouldn't put it quite that way. I would say his interest in an oir that's going to be a mokar liyesh is equal to the oir that's higher than being a mokar liyesh, and that's before the tzimtzum. The tzimtzum is not the mokar liyesh. The tzimtzum is only revealing the oir before the tzimtzum that's a mokar liyesh. That's how I would rephrase it.
And what about the yesh itself? It's also equal.
I mean, I don't know what you mean by equal. He's talking about two levels of yichud and two levels of oir here. He's not talking about the yesh itself. He's talking about the process of creating the yesh. And as I said, we'll talk about the yesh itself later. I don't want to confuse it here. Right now, he's talking about the oir that creates the yesh. As I said, the topic is not over, so we have more to go, even here. Let me see here. Should we learn more now, or should we stop here? Let's see. Okay, I'll just say this. We're not going to learn inside right now. Let me just explain where we're going to go here. The Rebbe Rashab is coming close to tying up the understanding of what he began to explain on page 1466. And that is the two levels of Yichud Eloh, Yichud Tata. That there's two types of Yichud, and then there's how they both join as one. He began this on page 1466, where he began to explain the shemen, the psila, the oir, the oil, the wick, and the light, in understanding how to transform the animal soul. V'hafta is Hashem Elokecha. So what we're going to learn in this next paragraph, which is going to conclude Ayin Beis, is going to tie all this up together, these levels of yichud that we just mentioned. But as I said, I think with everything set up here, and we're going to go then, I'm not sure whether I'll go to the Alter Rebbe's Maimer or the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer. You could then see how this next step has to be. After we know that, then he has to come back and answer the question. How does this understanding of these two levels of yichud help us educate the animal soul to love God and to turn it into shemen? Remember, the animal soul is the oil that fuels the wick of the divine soul as it manifests in the body of the animal soul. So we still have to go back to understand how does this help us understand that. And the Maimon Teiraer in Mika Hashem Elokeinu and Mittler Rebbe, they do conclude. They do bring it back. The Rebbe Rashab, unfortunately, did not finish the Hemshech, so we don't have that Eisfir, that conclusion. There's still more things that need to be finished, which is also understanding Teiraer. You know, there's a question that he asked the bottom of page 1474. Yes, Lefiza lo yeshum isavas klal, which I think he already did answer, but all that will be understood more when we learn the Mittler Rebbe. Now, there's no choice. I wish the Rebbe Rashab had continued and concluded this whole theme. He didn't. But as I said, there's enough here to go with, and when we combine it with the Mittler Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, we'll get a bigger picture. So I'm just asking you to keep that flow in mind. So the next step is going to talk now about Atzmus, back to Atzmus, where the Parsa is not mafsik. This distinction we just said about the two tracks is in our experience, in our consciousness, but not from Atzmus consciousness. And that's why in Atzmus, they are both one. He's going to go back to explain that. And then that's going to set the stage to come back to understand how this contemplation on Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem, for Hashem Elokeinu and Hashem Echad, can help sublimate and harness the animal soul to love God. So we already spoke about it a few times, but we're going to learn that inside a lot more now as we move forward. But I think right now it's wise to stop at this paragraph to go a little slower. I'm going to go slower than usual because I want to be able to transition properly and explain it well. Because the Rebbe Rashab, as I said, to explain well how we go from here to the Maimorim that this is taken from. Again, the Alter Rebbe and the Mittler Rebbe. But if anybody has any questions right now, I'll be happy to take them, and then we'll stop.
I know what you said before. That makes a lot of sense. But after what you said just now from the Mittler Rebbe, from the Alter Rebbe, which is not so clear to me, and maybe this will be discussed later. You said that the Yichud Eloi, Yichud Tato, everything is in the oil, Hashayches Loilames, and the oil, She'ein Hashayches Loilames. But I think that seems to me that this is, the punchline is that it's in Yesh and Ivro. This is directly from the Atzmus. You said we'll talk about it later. Just bringing it up.
I trust me, I would not bring that in here because it doesn't belong here at all. And you'll see why when we learn. Remember, the Yesh on its own does not say Shema Yisrael and does not say Baruch Shem. A Yesh is just a Yesh HaNivra. That would be like saying that since the Yesh HaNivra comes from Atzmus, you don't need Torah, you don't need mitzvahs, you don't need Avodah. It was created by Atzmus, but we're not aware of that. The Yesh HaNivra is Aniva Afsiyeh. The Yesh HaNivra is the Mukar for all Yeshes. The fact that it was created by Atzmus, who told us that? That Torah tells us that. We're talking here the process of Yichud, the mitzvah of Yichud. Why we have to say Shema, Baruch Shem, why we need a Hizbonenus. Because the Yesh is not aware of Atzmus. You're talking Atzmus because you learned it in Torah Sachsidus, to be exact. So you know about it. What you're saying is a statement from Oyer, not from Yesh. The Oyer taught you that the Yesh has these milas. We'll get to the fact that the Yesh itself, that's why it's critical to understand that the first, before page 1350, where you spoke about the Helam Atzmi and the Yesh, Momata Lamaila, that we come from distress, we come to Aramimcha Lekai HaMelech through Tefillah, is a very different track than what he's learning here. Here he's teaching us Torah, Oyer, how the Neshama reveals. In the language of Torah, the Nefesh HaLekis is revealing this to the Nefesh Habam. The Nefesh Habam is, and the Yesh could be rooted in Atzmus from today till tomorrow, but it's not aware of it. Look how human beings behave. I don't think we need proof that we all have a strong Yetzirah, and just to say the Yesh HaNivra is one with the Yesh HaMiti does not necessarily change a person. That's just a nice statement, and it's true. But now you need the Aveda Gdela, which is what we've been trying to do now for 5,784 years to bring Mashiach. And that's what he's talking about here, the Aveda, and that's through Oyer. Oyer is what allows us to experience godliness. The Yesh HaNivra does not allow that. The Yesh HaNivra on its own is just a Gelam. It's just a pure creation that only Mitzvusim, Atzmusi, and Atzmus could create. That's correct. But that has to all be revealed to it and has to all come through a process of sublimation and so on and so forth. That's why I'm very adamant here not to talk about that, because it's really the opposite of what he wants to say here. Once the Oyer does his job, the Nefesh HaLekis educates the Nefesh HaBamis, and the Yesh, it will reveal in the Yesh an Etzem, something even higher than the Nefesh HaLekis and the Neshama has. And that's why Neshama and the Zunus min Aguf. But here he's talking about how to get there. Was that clear?
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. Rab Shlomo, we can't get away from Aveda.
Reb Simon, you are our Dugma Chaya.
No. I'm the teacher, but I'm not the Dugma Chaya. I don't know if I'm the Dugma Chaya.
He's the Sherpa.
I think some of you have done more Aveda than I have in my life. Okay. But we'll get to listen. We're not saying goodbye. So if I told you this is it, one more page, there's plenty to review and plenty to learn. We're going to achieve. I think we're going to it's going to get very interesting and fascinating. My challenge is how to go from the Rebbe Rashab back to the Mittler Rebbe and the Alter Rebbe. It's not an easy thing to do because the Rebbe Rashab has a certain signon, and that signon is going to be harder to. But we'll get through that too. Mechamta Shel Teira, it's called the war in Teira. So there's a war on the ground, and we have to do the war of Torah, the war of our minds, our hearts, our souls. So think of it like a battle.
Well, it's a good time to be focusing on that because we have an internal battle and we have an external battle, and
Yep.
one relates to the other.
1,000%.
I would.
Somebody once told the Rebbe, it was after the Yom Kippur War, and the Rebbe said, he was from Israel. The Rebbe said, "What are you doing here? Why aren't you in Israel fighting?" So he said to the Rebbe, "He's here to learn Torah." So the Rebbe asked him, "What time does he wake up to learn?" What he meant was like this: if you wake up 11 o'clock, and first you have a hearty Mediterranean breakfast, and then you have a hearty falafel shawarma for lunch, and then a nice dinner, and in between you're sticking some Torah, it's not exactly being mobilized and drafted into a battlefield. If you're fighting to learn Torah, you wake up 4 a.m., 5 a.m., like Yitzchak does in California, 6:30 a.m., whatever the time. Then we're talking battle mode, battle mindset. You got the point, right?
May
100%.
I suggest that remember for the last, I don't know, a long time, couple years, you said that the Rebbe Rashab does not finish Ayin Beis, and that we'll be left with certain questions, and then hopefully you'll be able to answer it. If I could suggest that after maybe the next page, when we actually finish up, you could tell us what those questions are, and what do you think?
Of course, I'm going to do. Of course, I'm going to do that. That's where I get the cue for understanding the whole flow here. Absolutely.
Okay.
I could tell you right now offhand, I've already reviewed it 1,000 times in my mind. I could tell you what page exactly. I could show you, I've to build this structure, you have to go back and see things the Rebbe Rashab opened up and never finished, places he wrote that we will explain it later. I have a bunch of places to identify. I got it all here. Yeah. I have it marked up quite well here.
Amazing.
We'll do that.
So I assume
It's like a little like a treasure hunt in a way, where you have to go back and see the telltale signs of every little thing that the Rebbe Rashab said. There's a few excellent references. I told you, I feel like the Rebbe Rashab in some way prepared us for this, that even if he didn't finish it, there'd be enough signs, enough clues to figure it out. And especially once I discovered the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, that's when I had a big simcha. I realized we got it worked out. It's going to take a little work, but we'll get there.
I assume that you've learned through the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer completely, that you're going to leave. So
I have.
Because it would have been interesting to see, without having not done that, you thought we might be able to answer, come to get some kind of Derek Efshar, we could have answered these unanswered questions, and then we could see what the Mittler Rebbe is and see how far off we were, or close.
That you can do afterwards if you want to quiz. I couldn't do that because if I could find something from a Rebbe, I felt on much more steady ground than if I did it myself. And the truth is that, yes, there are some things that I was able to figure out pretty much without seeing the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, but the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer, just besides confirming it, there's also some things, trust me, there's some things the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer does not resolve. So I didn't even get there yet. There are things, for example, the connection to the Yesh HaNivra, Yesh HaMiti we're talking about, to the first level of Mamata L'mayla. I think there's also enough clues in the Mittler Rebbe and the Alter Rebbe's Maimer to get there. I feel, but it's like less obvious. So we have a few stages here. First stage is to see what the Mittler Rebbe, Alter Rebbe, Mittler Rebbe say about this flow. Then we're going to have to bring it back to the bigger theme of Ayin Beis, because we still don't know how would the Rebbe Rashab. I'm convinced he would have gone back to the beginning, to the 3 levels of Kesser. And that we don't find directly in the Mittler Rebbe, Alter Rebbe's Maimer. So there are going to be things to figure out here. It's exciting in my mind, at least. We'll get there. But first, my goal is first get everything we know for sure, and then we see what's left to figure out. That's my objective here.
What do you mean 3 levels of Kessel? Atik and Arich. Meichas
Well,
Timor.
Go back to the beginning of Ayin Beis. I can't. It's not for here now. There's, right in the beginning, first page, he talks about 3 meanings in Kesser, and then he explains 3 levels in Kesser. No, there's no. It's only Atik and Arich, but in Atik itself, there's 2 levels, or in Arich, there are 2 levels. We'll get there. I just said that. For if you didn't get it yet, we'll talk about that later. It's not relevant right now.
Rabbi Yitzchok, would you mind to put the exact sources of the Ma'amorim for Mittel Rebbe and the Alter Rebbe?
He already did twice, by the way, Rab Shlomo, for your benefit. He already posted
I also,
it.
Rab Shlomo, please check my personal communication to you on WhatsApp. I've sent it to you directly.
Thank you very much.
I'll send it to you again. Bli Neder, I'll send it to you again, but please look at your
You may send
personal...
it again, but if he's but if Rab Shlomo is not able to access it, again, is not going to help.
Okay, Rab Shlomo,
No. If you send it to me, I'm able to access.
Okay, all right. Or you can give me your email address and I'll email it to you. Then maybe that's a better way for you to receive it.
It's no problem. Like what you send in the WhatsApp, I have it.
Okay. I think the problem is you have to download it, because if you're going to keep scrolling up to go find it, then you're going to get lost. So when I send it to you, download it, put it in your phone or put it in your computer, and then you'll have it to learn.
Thank you.
Sure, happy to help.
We're going to have to find a way to when I'm going to learn the Mittler Rebbe. I don't think everybody's going to be able to download it. I'm not sure. Maybe we'll.
Why don't you put it on the website?
Is it sold in Kahas? I mean, is there a safer we can buy in Kahas that has it?
If it's in print, yeah, it's Bereshis. It's Mittler Maimori Admorim said Bereshis. But what we'll do is what Yitzchok just said. We'll post it right after the Ayin Beis. We'll post both the Alter Rebbe's Maimer and the Mittler Rebbe, because I'll most likely learn both. I want to learn them both, because the Alter Rebbe is where it all begins. It's like the real foundation of it all. Mittler Rebbe develops it's a whole work of its own. It could take us months to get through that.
Bereshis in Toras Chaim.
I said Maimori Admur. Why don't you look up what Rabbi Yitzchok sent you, and you'll see it all.
Thank you.
Okay, we're stopping here.